Hello and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching vSphere Web Client. In this lesson, we'll be covering the all-new VMware vSphere 5.1 web client. This web client is very different from the web client that you probably saw with VMware vSphere 5. In fact, it's so different you may not even recognize it. It's much more beautiful, the user interface is easier to use, and in my opinion, it's a 99% fully functional replacement for the traditional Windows-based VMware vSphere client. In fact, let's do a quick comparison. This is the Windows-based vSphere client that you're used to using, that you've been using most likely for many years. It only works on Windows. You have to install it locally. It has its own set of plugins. It has a home screen, and it has its own set of limitations. For comparison, here's the all-new VMware vSphere 5.1 web client. Again, here's the home screen. You can go into the vCenter server, into the inventory trees. For example, here's the host and cluster inventory. And you'll find that some things are very similar. For example, the summary tab on this ESXi host server, you can tell it's a Dell server and you get quick information about the CPU, memory, and storage. But on the other hand, navigating this vSphere web client, in some cases, using the new tabs on the left and the new panels along the right for task, work in progress, and alarms can all be very different than using the traditional Windows-based vSphere client and will take some getting used to. One of my goals for this lesson is to make this transition easier because in the future, this web-based client will be the only vSphere management client available. Now, coming back to our slides, again, I want to reinforce the features of the new vSphere 5.1 web client. Those features are, first, it's operating system independent. So whatever operating system you're using, Linux, Windows, Windows 8, Windows 2012, whatever it is, it's got a web browser, and that web browser can run the vSphere 5.1 web client. Just a quick note about the Mac OS operating system. If you're using Mac OS X, you can use any of the web browsers to administer your vSphere virtual infrastructure using the vSphere 5.1 web client. However, those web browsers are not yet supported. And the other issue is if you try to connect to the virtual machine console of your vSphere 5.1 virtual machines, you'll find it's simply not possible using a web browser in the Mac OS X operating system. The option that you have is to run, let's say, a virtual machine inside VMware Fusion in Mac OS X and then use a Windows-based web browser to access those virtual machine consoles, or run the vSphere Windows-based client inside of that Windows-based operating system, or even just RDP to a Windows server and then run the vSphere web client or vSphere Windows client from there. Still, even with that issue that's lingering that hopefully VMware will resolve relating to the Mac OS X operating system, the vSphere web client gives us so many benefits being browser-based. I can see if I'm downstairs trying to help a user and they're having some problem, I can very quickly jump into their web browser, check on a virtual infrastructure, virtual machine, maybe access the console, maybe reset that virtual machine, or just start up some services. Now let's move on and let's talk about the new tab functionality in the vSphere web client. The tab navigation with the vSphere 5.1 web client has been improved. The navigation overall and usability, in my opinion, is much, much better. The tagging feature, I know we haven't gotten into that very deeply yet, but you can actually tag objects and then you can use those tags to give you greater flexibility in how you display information in the web client. And I'll show you how to create a tag here in just a few minutes. And then the other feature I'll show you in just a few minutes is the work in progress feature, or you could also call it pause and resume. So no matter what task you're working on in the vSphere 5 web client, it might be creating a new virtual machine, for example, you can pause that, you can go do something else, and you can come back later and you'll be exactly where it was that you left off in that task. The other benefit of the new vSphere 5.1 web client is the scalability. The Windows-based vSphere client had some scalability issues with large virtual infrastructures. There was a problem called the white screen of death, where you would connect, you would just get this white screen for a long time, and your vSphere client might hang. It might just take a long time to open. That's no longer a problem with the web-based vSphere 5.1 client. In fact, VMware says that you can have 3 times more active sessions with the web client than you could ever have with the Windows-based vSphere client. So again, I want to stress that this is going to be the only version of the vSphere client offered in the next version of VMware vSphere. However, in vSphere 5.1, of course, there is still the Windows-based vSphere client. That's still available. The Windows-based client hasn't yet gone away, but now is the right time to start using and learning the vSphere web client, and I recommend trying to use it on a daily basis for all your administrative tasks so that you get used to it. In fact, in this video training course on vSphere 5.1, I will be trying to use the web-based client almost exclusively for all the different tasks and features that I demonstrate throughout the course. At this point, I'd like to get a little bit more into actually using the vSphere 5.1 web client. I'd like to show you how to pause and resume tasks. I'd like to show you how to create tags on objects in the vSphere 5.1 web client interface. So with that, let's go back to the lab. Over in my web browser, now I'd like to point out exactly how to access the Windows-based vSphere web client. So here I just went to the URL for my vCenter server. From here I can still download the Windows-based vSphere client, or notice on the right-hand side over here where I can log in to the vSphere web client. So if I click on that, I'll choose to continue to the website. And notice the port number actually up here. It's :9443. So you can actually just go to the hostname or IP address of your vCenter server and then put :9443 on that, and that will bring up the vSphere web client. Something else that's important I want to point out is that it says here Internet Explorer is running in protected mode. Depending on your browser and your browser security settings, you might get this message up here. It says you need to disable this to use the vSphere client integration plugin. The vSphere client integration plugin is a plugin for your browser that's going to allow you to access the consoles of the virtual machines. You can still use the vSphere web client without it, but without it you won't be able to see the consoles of the virtual machines. So it says to disable protected mode, deselect enable protected mode. And then we get a little more information if we hover over and it says on the security tab of Internet Explorer's Internet Options. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'll go down here to my Internet Options. I'll go to the Security tab, and I'll uncheck Enable Protected Mode. I'll click Apply here. I know it's going to put my computer at risk, but I'm just going to say OK and OK. And then we do need to restart our browser. Okay, I restarted my browser, and this time instead of just going to the vCenter server's URL and then clicking to go into the vSphere web client, I'm going to type in https:// the hostname of the vCenter server, and then :9443. I'll press enter on that, and that'll take me directly into the vSphere web client. Notice this time we didn't get the security warning about the protected mode related to the client integration plugin. So I'll go ahead and go down here and click to download the client integration plugin. I'll click Run as soon as that's downloaded. And then we'll run this quick installation of the vSphere Web Client Integration plugin version 5.1. It says we need to close Microsoft Internet Explorer, which I'll do that. I'll click Retry here, click Next, accept the license terms, go ahead and proceed with the installation. With the installation complete, I'll click Finish here, and then we can restart our browser. And then again this time, I'll go into https://vCenter51 :9443. And it tells us down here that this web page wants to run the following add-on, the vSphere Client Support plugin from VMware. Yes, we do want to allow that. And now there's no more message down here related to the integration client plugin. So I'll just go ahead and log in. The default username and password is root and VMware. Of course, that's something you're going to want to change very quickly. And of course, that also assumes you're using the vCenter Server appliance, the Linux-based vCenter Server appliance. That's what allowed me to use the web-based vSphere client. I'll close this message about my license keys, and I'm going to actually press F11 here to maximize the screen so we can get a little bit more real estate here. Now, I said there was a few different things I wanted to show you about using the new vSphere 5.1 web client. The first one is these panels on the left and right hand side. These can actually be unpinned. So here you see the little push pin. If I click on that pin, that panel is unpinned and it has collapsed over on the left-hand side. Same thing on this panel on the right-hand side. If I unpin that, that panel collapses. But notice here I still have information about recent tasks, work in progress, and alarms. You see the icons there with the numbers below them in parentheses. You can see with the alarm clock, I've actually got 2 alarms that I should take a look at. So I can very quickly glance at that and see the status of my events and work in progress and alarms. Over on the left-hand side, if I hover over this anytime, I can use this still to navigate into host and clusters. But if I move my mouse back over the main panel, that left panel again disappears or collapses into the left-hand side. So I've got more real estate to work on, whatever it is I'm working on in the main panel. That's a very cool feature, in my opinion, of the new vSphere 5.1 web client. Now, if I want these panels back and I have plenty of screen real estate, of course, I can pin them back at any point. I can also use this drop-down up here to navigate to different places in the vSphere web client. And also notice the tabs here. So I've got hosts and clusters, I've got virtual machines and templates, I've got storage information about my data stores that are available in this virtual infrastructure, and then information about my virtual networks. And if I were to click on the virtual machine network here, we see the standard switch and the Getting Started tab. Of course, if you've used the Windows-based vSphere client, of course, you're used to these Getting Started tabs on just about every object in the virtual infrastructure. For experienced VMware administrators, they can be somewhat of an annoyance when you first install the vSphere Windows-based client. You have to go through there and close all those tabs. A quick way to get rid of those tabs in the web-based vSphere client is to go up here to Help, and then down to Hide All Getting Started Pages. That quickly gets rid of those Getting Started tabs across the entire vSphere infrastructure for this vSphere web client user. Now let me demonstrate a couple of the other new features I mentioned. The first one is tags. If we go up here to the vCenter server level, and then down to the inventory list, notice the inventory list down here that give you a total of all the different types of objects in the virtual infrastructure, and then you can very quickly drill down into those and see, for example, I have 2 data stores. I can click on one of those data stores and get information about it. And one of the things I could do here, of course, is I could go up to Actions, and then down to Assign Tag. I can also right-click on the data store from the data store inventory and choose to assign a tag there. So I'll click here to assign a tag. And these tags are really going to replace the custom attributes that you've seen in previous versions of the vSphere client. So you can think of tags as your own inventory system for the vSphere infrastructure. You can tag objects with whatever different types of tags and categories of tags that you choose, and then you can do things with those. So you can search for those, you can report on those, you can create custom searches for those, and then even your third-party applications could use those tags for whatever purposes you want. For example, I could create some data store tags, and then I could tag objects with local data stores versus shared storage. I might create company division tags, so I have a tag for the HR division, a tag for the manufacturing division, a tag for the finance division. Again, this is your inventory system. You can create whatever types of tag categories and tags that you choose and then assign those to all the various objects in the virtual infrastructure. So for example, let's go up here and create a new tag. And I'm going to call this tag local storage. Just a very simple example here. I'll need to create a new category because I don't have any categories. And I'll call these data store tags. And then look at the cardinality here. With the data store tags category, can you have one tag per object or many tags per object? Now, when it comes to data stores, of course, I'm going to assign this just to the data store object. You can assign it to various types of objects, but for the data store tags example, it would just be assigned to data stores. And you would really just want to have one tag per object because it's an either-or situation. So this data store is either going to be local storage or it's going to be shared storage. You're not going to assign it both local and shared storage. But with other examples, you might want to assign many tags per object. So you might have a virtual machine and perhaps you create a new tag category called data protection. And in that data protection category, you have backup and you have disaster recovery replication. And you have a virtual machine. Some virtual machines are assigned backup and disaster recovery replication. Other virtual machines have just backup. So you might, again, have category situations where you want to assign many tags per object. In my case, it's just going to be one tag per object because this is an either-or situation. I'll say OK here, and we've created a new tag category, which we can see up here, and also a new tag called local storage. Now, this actual data store is shared storage, so I'm again going to go up here. I'm going to create a new tag called shared storage, and it's going to be in the data store tags. I'll say OK there. And then this data store will assign it the shared storage tag by clicking there and saying OK. And notice down here under the tags section, this data store is now assigned the tag of shared storage. So here I can assign and I can detach tags from this object. Let's go to the other data store here. And notice right now it doesn't have any tags. So I'm going to click here to assign a tag. I'll click on local storage. I'll say OK. And then if I continued on this example, we talked about having tags for different divisions of the company. For example, I might create a category called Finance Division. And I'm going to have to create a new category for that. And these are going to be called Company Divisions. And in some cases, I might have many tags per object. For example, I might have a data store that many company divisions use. And this is going to apply to all objects in the virtual infrastructure. So I'll say OK here. We'll assign this object the Finance Division tag. And then let's go over to the shared storage here. And I'll assign the shared storage. We'll have to create a new tag. And this division is going to be manufacturing. And this is going to be a company division. We'll assign it manufacturing. And now it's got the shared storage tag, the manufacturing tag, but oh wait, this is also used by finance. So we'll assign the finance tag as well. So how do we use these tags? Let's go back up to the home level of the vSphere web client. And then notice here we have tags. This is where we manage our tags. And if I go in here, I can see the different tag categories that have been created. And if I go into the tags option here, I can see the different types of tags that have been created as well. Now there's multiple ways to use these tags, but let's go ahead in and create a new search, and we'll actually do a search and save the search based on tags. I'll do an advanced search. I want to search for a tag. The tag can satisfy any of the criteria, and the name of the tag must contain finance. I'll say I want to save this search, and I'll call it finance tags. Say OK there. Let's search, let's try it. We found the finance division. And here we see related objects. So now if we go back up to the home screen again, go into Save Searches, we've got finance tags. I'll double click on the finance division. There's all the objects that have that tag. So now I could go in, I could tag hosts, I could tag virtual machines, I could tag networks. There's a lot of different things you could do with these tags. Of course, in this case, I've just tagged data stores, but you'll be tagging a lot more than data stores once you really get the hang of how these tags can help you. So that's how the new tagging feature works in the vSphere web client. Now let's go back up to the home level again, and I'm going to go into vCenter, into virtual machines and templates. We'll expand this out. Then I'd like to create a new virtual machine. I'll go up to Actions and down to New Virtual Machine. And there's a number of new things related to creating new virtual machines, but I'll save that for another lesson. Let's just say I want to create a brand new virtual machine. I'm just going to call this Test VM. I'm going to put it in that virtual data center. I'll click Next here. I'm selecting a computing resource. And I got a phone call. They want me to restart a virtual machine that's hung. But I'm in the middle of this. What do I do? Well, you don't want to go to another computer. This is your only computer. You're going to use the work in progress or the new pause and resume feature. Notice these double arrows over here. If I click on this, I just paused my work, or I saved my work. I can go back into it just by clicking on the work in progress task there, or I can simply pause it by clicking on the double arrows. So now I can go over here, I can right click on this virtual machine, I can take care of the phone call that just came in. I'll click here to restart the guest operating system on this virtual machine. We took care of that task. Now let's go back and let's resume the task that we had in progress to create the new virtual machine. And we're right back where we were. So we can just continue this task. That makes using the vSphere web client super easy. It makes multitasking really possible. I forgot to do something else. Actually, that was the wrong virtual machine. You shouldn't do that in production. So I'm going to go over here and restart another virtual machine. Then we'll just go back over here to our work in progress. I'll click on that. And I'm just resuming my work where it was. Now I can actually have multiple works in progress over here. So I could minimize this, or actually pause that, and then I could go over here, let's say to storage, and then I can start a new task here. Underneath Actions, let's say I start creating a new data center. We'll call this Chicago. I'll say OK. We've got the new Chicago data center there. I'm going to right click on it. And then I'm going to start adding a new host here. And then let's see, I need to get the host name. So let's minimize this, or pause it, and send it to the work in progress queue. Now you can see over here I've got the add a new host work in progress going. I've got the new virtual machine going. I better finish that virtual machine before I add the new host. So I'll take the default for the new guest operating system. Just take the defaults on custom hardware. We're ready to complete. I'll click Finish. I completed that task, as you see over here in Work in Progress. Then I can go back to adding my host. So there we go. That's how you use the new Work in Progress feature in the newly improved vSphere 5.1 web client. So with that, let's go back to our slides. So now let's talk about the requirements to use the vSphere web client. Of course, first you need vSphere 5.1 to use the new vSphere 5.1 web client, but there's really two options that actually enable that web-based client. The first one is to use the vCenter Server appliance, or the VCSA. It comes with the vSphere web client already installed, and so there's really nothing more for you to do. You just access the vCenter Server appliance, click on the web client option, and you're into the web client. The second option is to use the traditional vCenter Server for Windows. And if you use that, then it requires that you install another piece that's on the same installation DVD or ISO called the vSphere Web Client Server. It's called the Web Client Server. I know that's a little confusing, but that's what they call it. When you install the vCenter Server for Windows, you also need to make sure that you install the vSphere Web Client Server, as that's going to allow you to use not only the Windows-based vSphere client, but also the new and improved vSphere 5.1 web client. Now, a couple considerations when using the vSphere 5.1 web client. The first one is that some of the new features are only available in the web client. So if you're looking for a new feature that's in vSphere 5.1 and you don't see it in the Windows client, go and check the vSphere 5.1 web client, because that's probably where you're going to find it. Another consideration is that the vSphere client for Windows plugins are not compatible with the vSphere web client. So if you have some third-party plugins that you use on a daily basis, or you need to manage your virtual infrastructure, you need to check with that third party and find out if they have a web client version of their vSphere plugin. So a couple considerations to keep in mind. And that brings us to the close of this lesson, where we covered the new vSphere 5.1 web client. Of course, the web client was around with vSphere 5, but in 5.1 it's totally revamped. It's all new and improved. There's a lot of new features in it. It's much more beautiful. It's much easier to use. It's much more enjoyable to use. And I encourage you to give it a try and try to make it your primary interface for managing vSphere 5.1, because VMware's already said in the next major release, the traditional Windows-based vSphere client will no longer be available. Again, thanks for watching this lesson on the new and improved vSphere 5.1 web client.